What's up, modelers? As promised in the last video, today we're going to start on the build of this beautiful Edge 540 from Tower Hobbies. But as with most ARFs, you don't start with the fuselage, you start with the wings. So let's get into it. Start the build by checking to see that the covering on the wings is nice and tight, and that the pre-installed hinges in the ailerons don't need any glue added. Since the servo holes come pre-cut, grab a servo and insert the vibration isolators and grommets into each hole. Attach a 12-inch extension to the servo lead and tape it to the string that is run through the wing. After checking in with the supervisor,
Kitten,
are you helping? Slowly feed the wire through the wing while pulling gently on the string. This can be a bit finicky, so take your time and slowly work through any snags the wire hits while being installed. Once that is done, pull the end of the servo lead through the hole in the bottom of the wing. Center the servo in the opening and use a pin vise to drill holes for the mounting screws. Temporarily mount the servo in place and then remove it and harden the threads with a drop of thin CA. After the glue has dried, permanently mount the servo back in place. Now assemble a push rod and use it to mark the location of the control horn on the aileron. Screw the control horn into the hardened wood blocks and finally connect the servo to the aileron. Hook the servo up to your receiver for a test and to make sure that the aileron is centered and moving in the right direction. Repeat everything for the other wing half and we're ready to move on. Okay, we have both wing halves ready to go, and since this model has a one-piece wing, it's time for a step that a lot of modelers dread, epoxying the wing halves together. There's one important thing you can do to make sure it goes smoothly, and that's dry fit it. This model has a wooden wing spar and it can go two different ways, so you got to make sure you have it done right, and it also has a wing pin, and you want to make sure everything fits together just right before you start mixing your epoxy and you're on a time limit. What I noticed with this one is the wing spar is ready to go, but that pin in the back right here is too long so it won't go together. This is why you dry fit. If you had your epoxy all mixed and ready to go and you only have 30 minutes to do it, you'd be stressing right now. Since we're dry fitting it, we can go ahead and fix it real simple and get going epoxying the wing. Shortening the nylon anti-rotation pin to the proper length is a snap with a hobby saw and miter box. Next, put a piece of tape on each wing half just past the glue joint. This makes cleaning up excess glues a breeze. Mix up a liberal amount of 30-minute epoxy. Start by coating the first half of the wing joiner and inserting it into one wing half. Then cover the other half of the joiner and the wing root with plenty of epoxy. Slide the wing halves together and make sure everything is lined up perfectly and that some epoxy oozes from the joint. Hold the wing halves together with a clamp at the front and tape at the rear. Clean up the joint with paper towels soaked in alcohol and then set the wing aside and allow the epoxy to fully cure. Now it's time to start on the fuselage. First, gather all of the parts and hardware needed for the landing gear. Then attach the wheel pants and wheels to the pre-bent aluminum gear. Place the assembled gear on the fuselage and attach it with the included machine screws, making sure to use a drop of blue Loctite on each screw where there is a metal-to-metal connection. When the wing is dry, mount it to the fuse and glue the strengthening block in place. Now we're ready to hook up some tail feathers. Remove the elevators and slide the horizontal stab into the pre-cut slot in the fuselage. This model cleverly has interlocking horizontal and vertical stabs, so getting everything centered is very easy. When you are happy with the fit, mix up some 30-minute epoxy and apply it to the horizontal stab where the covering has been removed, both on the top and bottom, but not in the center slot. Slide the horizontal stabilizer back into place and then once again align it using the vertical stab. Clean up all the excess epoxy using lots of paper towels and alcohol. Then measure from the stab tips to the wings to make sure everything is perfectly aligned. remove the vertical stab and let the epoxy cure. Clear out the slot for the bottom hinge on both the vertical stab and rudder. And after dry fitting the hinge and rear tail wheel assembly, mix up yet another batch of epoxy and apply it inside the slot and to the bare wood on the vertical stabilizer. Fitting the stab into place took a little extra effort, but eventually everything slid into place nicely. As always, clean up the excess epoxy and let everything dry. Next up, mount the tail wheel bracket by first drilling the holes with a pin vise and then screwing it down to the fuselage. Mount the wheel on the tail wheel wire and secure it in place with a collar and set screw. Now we're ready to mount the elevators. Okay, tip time. If you're building an ARF that uses these CA hinges, here's a tip that will make installing them a snap. First, get a scrap piece of wood, draw a line down the center, and then 2 more lines, one on each side, and install 2 T-pins in the center of each hinge. Then, get one of these hinge slotting kits from Dubro and use this tool to clean out little wood particles from all the slots. Then install the hinges into the control surface and finally slide it into place. By using 2 pins like we did, it keeps the hinge centered and prevents it from rotating when you install the control surface. Finish up by wicking in your thin CA and you're good to go. Make sure to clean up any leftover CA with a paper towel soaked with Goo Gone to prevent any white glue marks on your brand new airplane. Attach the control horns for the rudder and elevators, this time using bolts and back plates instead of screws, and then mount the 3 servos in the fuselage. 1 for the rudder and 1 for each elevator half. You can use just 1 servo for both elevator halves, but I always prefer 2 when possible. Hook up the 3 control rods to the surfaces and servos and test out all the controls. Shake them tail feathers. Next up, assemble and glue together the included plywood motor box, making sure to use the strengthening triangles as shown in the manual. Drill 4 holes in the firewall at the pre-marked locations. Install 4 blind nuts and attach the motor box using the included hardware, and don't forget the Loctite. Once that is done, you can bolt your motor to the motor box with the included hardware and attach your prop adapter. This baby should have some serious power. Because the motor I chose was slightly longer than the one in the manual, I had to attach 4 wooden blocks to mount the cowl. Then, mark the location of the holes using paper. Temporarily tape the cowl in place, making sure it is perfectly centered, and drill the holes for the 4 mounting screws. Remove the cowl and enlarge the holes only in the fiberglass cowl, and then mount it to the fuselage permanently. Almost done. Next, cut open the slots on the bottom of the fuselage so everything stays nice and cool. Lastly, mount the receiver, making sure to have your antennas routed at 90 degrees from each other. Hook up the servo leads and DSC and mount the prop and spinner. This baby is just about ready to fly. I've just finished the build on this beautiful Edge 540 from Tower Hobbies, and overall I have to say this has been an excellent ARF. It went together smooth and very easy. I had 2 small gripes. First is they provide a motor box for mounting an electric motor, but it's not adjustable. So if you're going to use a motor other than the one they recommend, you're going to have to do a little bit of tweaking. With my setup, I had to readjust the cowl about 5 millimeters forward to fit everything correctly, but that was no big deal. The other thing was when this canopy first came, it was a little bit loose. The hole that the retaining pin went into was just a little bit elongated, and so it could rattle. And not a big deal if you're electric powered, but if you were nitro powering this, it would really rattle. So what I did is I took a small piece of 1/8 inch ply, glued it behind theirs and drilled a single hole, and now it fits really nice. Those are the only two things, and they were both really minor. Overall, I think this is an excellent airplane, and I can't wait to take it out of the field and get it flying, which we'll do in the next video.